All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're located. My name is Jeannie Jaworski, and this is our 9th Student Affairs Expat Panel. Today, we are speaking with a fantastic panelist about career and life coaching and etc. As I've just learned, there's a lot of other initiatives going on with our fantastic panelists as well. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. You all are muted for the duration of the call. It will be our panelists speaking Q&A facilitated. If you have any questions at any time, you can submit them in the chat. If you would prefer to ask your question, just either send me a message or use the little hand raise icon, and I'd be happy to unmute you to ask your question directly. If you would prefer to ask a anonymous or somewhat anonymous question, you have two options. The first option is to rename yourself in the Zoom participants list. So you should have the ability to do that by clicking on more on your name. And you can rename it to anything and then ask your questions in the general chat. The other option is to send me a message directly. So no, if you do that, I will see your name, whatever it is on Zoom, but I won't share that when I ask the question to our panelists. So those are the options. Also, I wanted to make sure you're aware on the screen, there's a link. It's a bit.ly link, so it is case sensitive, but if you go to that link, all of our panelists have been really generous in sharing their contact information as well as additional resources for after this call if you have a need for additional learning. So make sure you check that out. All right, so we're going to get started by having our fantastic panelists introduce themselves. And so we'll just ask for them to share their name as well as what their current responsibilities, roles, titles are, and then what their background is in student affairs and higher education. So we'll get started with Jen. And you're muted.
Hey y'all, I'm JenFry. I run JenFryTalks. JenFryTalks is a social justice firm that focuses on educating and empowering those within athletics through an anti-racist lens. What I'm on here for is I hate to say like I'm well known, but I'm well known for writing resumes and cover letters and really seeing how we can make experiences and skills pop so that it's not the situation where you're just sending out kind of consistently the same resume or the same cover letter to every single job, but understanding what is needed so that you can set yourself apart, as well as understand how to include the job description to make it that you're getting to the next level. My experience is I was a college volleyball coach for 15 years before I started to leave to get into diversity and inclusion, and I worked in academics, student affairs at Duke for 3 years before I decided to leave, focus on speaking full time, as well as getting my PhD. Just in case you want to know, that's Fish. He'll be joining us for the conversation more than likely. So if you see something jumping on me, just know it's my cat, because we're 3 months in and animals are always welcome to Zoom meetings now.
That's right. And I'm sorry I don't have a photo of Fish on our slide. I would have happily included him, but
he is disappointed. I just wanted to say that he is, but I'll talk to him afterwards.
I'll try to make it better. All right. Thanks, Jen. Quintrel and Lorayah, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Quintrel Lenore. I'll let my wife introduce herself as well. So we're both career coaches. We lead Lenore Coaching LLC. The work that we do is overall career decision making. So we work with students before they get to college. We also work with early career professionals and experienced professionals. This is going to include anywhere from resume cover letter writing to developing your personal brand to overall job search strategy, networking, and so forth. We really enjoy the purpose kind of driven, we call it purpose-driven pillars, where folks that are really figuring out what it is that they're interested in doing and just trying to develop mission and confidence and clarity in their overall career journey, if you will. My background has been in higher education. I currently work for an institution in an employee development role. I've also been able to serve as a career advisor and working in athletics as an academic advisor.
Hi, I'm Lorayah Lenore, and I am a co-founder of Lenore Coaching. And like Quint said, we definitely want to work with people to help them articulate their skills. I think that's the confidence piece is what we found. You know, people have the skills, they have the talents, but they don't know how to portray that, or they don't have the confidence to make that switch to a new role or, you know, new field. So that's what we would like to do. My experience, I had academic advising experience. So I worked in a business business school. And so with that, since it was decentralized, I was able to do academic and career advising. So I walked with students from the beginning to the end, still connected to them. And I just really enjoyed helping finish that loop. And so currently I'm working in a health sciences diversity pipeline office. So exposing middle school students all the way up to post-bac students to different health science professions.
Great, thank you. Meredith, we'll go to you next.
Thanks. Hi, y'all. I'm Meredith Mitnick. I am the founder of MRM Career Coaching. I have jumped around a little bit in my career, so I'm proof that the pivot can work. I started in HR. I have about a decade of HR experience. I then moved into student affairs, where I did a little bit of advising, but very program heavy, events heavy. I went into events on my own, and then COVID happened, so we pivoted there again. And here I am leaning full tilt into career coaching. So my focus is largely on supporting women who are making big career changes. Much like Lenore shared, I love that process of helping folks understand their story and what they bring into the table, and how you're able to create a compelling narrative to tell people, here's what I do, here's what I can do for you, and really feel good and confident about yourself in doing that.
Great, thank you. And Megan will have us close us out here.
Great. Well, my name is Megan Pendley Pickett, and I work with Pendley Pickett coaching and consulting. And so really my role in what I do is focus on career and also life coaching. And I live in Colorado, right? So we can get away with some hippy dippy language around life coaching, but really looking at that holistic picture of finding the career that is going to support the life you want to live, and not the other way around. And so I primarily, although I work with anyone and have clients outside of higher education, my heart is always with educators. And so either for folks who are in higher education and looking to up level in their career, what's that next step? How can they prepare themselves so they can show up as the best version of themselves? Having had experiences as a manager where I was not the best version of myself, I can see where where all of that went. And then also helping people who are looking to transition out of higher education or other careers that they are in, but primarily higher education. Again, that storytelling piece, really pulling your materials together, getting your mind around, I'm ready for this new job and this is why. So really helping people on that. My background is in higher education. I came up primarily through fraternity and sorority life, but ended as a director of student engagement. So orientation, student activities, graduate students, kind of the whole, everything that was outside of the classroom, outside of academic advising, I left that to my husband to do, was where I come from. So that is who I am.
Great, thank you all so much. And of course, our focus of this panel is for folks who want to follow a similar path and go, their own route in doing what you're doing. But for everyone on the call, I also just want to make sure you keep in mind what people are sharing. If any of these stories resonate with you, these might be folks who you might want to actually use their services and reach out to them to see if there's a way that they can help you take that next step as well. Okay, so I see from the attendee list that we have a lot of folks who have attended a number of our panels already, which is awesome. And thank you so much for keep coming back. I do want to say that this set of questions is different than all of the other panels, because it doesn't make sense to ask these entrepreneurs things like how they adjusted their resume to get the job they have when they're the ones who made it happen. So we have a different set of questions here, and I just want to start with making sure that we all have a better understanding of what you're doing in your day-to-day roles now. But of course, my guess is that a day in the life of a career coach, a life coach, or an entrepreneur is not a thing. And so let's look more big picture. What does maybe a month in your life look like as it relates to running your business? And I'm going to start with Quintrel and Lorayah for this one. Sorry, Quintrel.
What does a month look like? Man, so I'm big on kind of like slicing up the pie. So, Lorayah and I we're married. We have 2 beautiful kids. We work full time, and we have this coaching business on the side. And it's challenging to call it a side hustle, because we spend so much time and energy before we go to work, after we go to work, putting in time to grow our business. And what that looks like, obviously, is like making sure we are giving sound advice, sound coaching. So we're learning constantly how to serve other folks with their career journey. And so how a month typically looks, it's no sort of straightforward way. It's pretty much all over the place. I'm big on, I like to brainstorm on things. We have a big old whiteboard in our office right now. And I just brain dump all of our project to upcoming clients, how we want to market our services and so forth. But then we have to sort of like to bring these projects to life. So we really plug in some of those big picture pieces on our calendar. Lorayah and I are always talking throughout the day for what this looks like, who's executing what. And then I like to write stuff down. So when my wife gives me the honey-do list, I have to write this on a piece of paper to make sure I'm actually doing it. So to answer your question, it's a bunch of moving pieces, but we try to manage all that we have with some really easy project management tools. So managing our business, our family, our 9 to 5, and other stuff outside of that.
And I just want to add that marketing is like really big for us. So we're new, so we just started in December. So we're still trying to navigate and figure out our flow. And so social media is big and we're still trying to learn it. But we will do like a 3-month type of like marketing plan where we'll try and like have a Google Doc and just put in, all right, here's some posts we're gonna do. And then there's this, it's an app called Planolly, Planolly. And we just make our posts in Canva and like we put it in there. So I'll like do that like a month ahead, just to try and make a routine out of things, because day to day it can get busy. My job is mainly programming. So that's one like, you know, tangible thing that we do. So, yep.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Meredith, how about you? What does your month look like?
Yeah, I live in the planner tools like y'all are talking about. So I'm on Later instead of the Planolly. I was there for a little bit. So yeah, so marketing is a huge piece right now, especially with everybody in front of their computers, and the world is just, it's upside down in so many ways. So navigating that and a business is definitely a piece that I think is all the tools that you can to help automate and make things easier on yourself is better. Much like y'all, I think it's kind of like the one-woman show or like the team show here is, you know, we're not big CEOs of anything. So a lot of it is bootstrapping what you can do. So I have my time where I'm working one-on-one with clients. I'm working on attracting new clients, on engaging with existing clients and providing some additional services to them as they go. My whole thing is networking when it comes to the job search. That's really like my soapbox. I hop up there, I talk about it all the time. And so I really try to apply that in the business side of things as well. So, you know, much like y'all mentioned, mapping out, ideally, you know, I had a big plan for 3 months and then I've had to go back and rewrite it like every other day. And I was like, oh, I have all these posts planned. And I was like, nope, that's not what we're going. We're going to twist it a little bit. We're going to go in this other direction. So a big piece of it is just going with the flow and being able to pivot and move as things are coming up and changing. I also have 2 toddlers at home, and my husband works in the entertainment industry, which is an interesting place to be right now as well. So we are tag teaming kids and work, and y'all see I'm in my bedroom, which is not generally how this works. But I think, you know, the typical month, I'm yet to have a typical month, but I think that's kind of what keeps it exciting in this space is, you know, every client I have an idea of what I'm going to walk in with, and then they tell me what happened. Sometimes they had a plan and then they got laid off, or that promotion that they were up for is no longer available. So, you know, really having that opportunity to make such an impact and serve in that way is really been a huge part of what has made this an enjoyable career for me.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for joining us from your bedroom. Megan, what does your month look like?
Yeah, much like everybody has shared, it looks very different, and it looks very different now for everyone, right? I also have 2 kids, and my husband works for the airline industry, which luckily has meant that he has worked more and not less, but that also means that we're doing all of this right on our own as much as possible. I also work with a nonprofit organization helping high school students get into college. And so I'm kind of doing a both and, like everyone said, really looking at that marketing piece, how to get that message out there, how to connect with people authentically is what I spend my time on. And then obviously working with clients and what works for them, right? And what's the best way to serve them. And some of the things that I do to kind of spend my professional development time is I work with my own coaches. That has really helped me. So I have a business coach that I have been working with for a while. I actually also just hired a coach to help develop an anti-racist lens for myself, which has been really very outside of my comfort zone, not the anti-racist piece, but really developing that and figuring out the best way again to serve, because with folks being in higher education and really thinking through that, how do we translate that then outside of higher education, out of the bubble, if you will. So it is kind of all over the place, but in a good way. Where I get to, because I get all of my work, luckily or unluckily, happens within this room that you can see. And so figuring out, again, that calendaring time. I wish I'm like writing down some of the automated apps that people are talking about. I'm like, I'm just never smart enough to automate things if you don't do it on your own, right? If it's not hard. So learning some of those things as well in coaching communities, and then being able to share that then with my clients. So it's that kind of learning to teach, and then teaching to learn is my cycle. So, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Jen.
So I'm kind of different in the sense of everyone else is doing like career coaching and stuff. And my main thing is my social justice firm, which right now is exploding. Luckily, I don't even know if like positively, whatever. But some of the things that I've focused on is how to remain relevant, because my March and April were completely full of me traveling. And then as we know with COVID, it canceled everything. So I had to look at this space of going from being in front of people to now what does kind of completely changing myself to make it that I'm more relevant in this space. So I've worked really hard of navigating that virtual space of, so I work with a young lady named Jane Rodriguez who does branding, and she's absolutely phenomenal human being in all aspects. And she has helped me brand everything that I need to make sure that virtually everything looks the same and everything is very uniform. And so that has been one of the things. In terms of another app that I use for planning is called Hootsuite, Hootsuite. And the reason I love them is before you were able to have 3 accounts on there, but now you can have unlimited, you can have up to 10 social media accounts and unlimited scheduling. So that one is really good because I think kind of all of you all, I have a cat and y'all have kids. And I mean, I have a plant that I still keep alive, but that thing is on its own. I won't show you my succulents. But Hootsuite, I feel like for people who are wanting to get into this field of doing their own business, it's a really good planning tool because you use Canva, and Canva I think is $100 for the year, and it develops really good marketing. And then you'll say, okay, for this hour, I'm going to develop all my marketing. And then with Hootsuite, I'm going to plan it for whatever I need it to do. And you can set it all out. So it all goes out. You know, I read that on Twitter, you can post the same things multiple times a day because it goes through a timeline. On Instagram, you could post maybe 3 times a week and it's fine. A lot of times people think you have to post so much on every social media, but you really don't. On Instagram, you post 2 or 3 times a week and that's good enough. And so I think it's like, how can I remain relevant? I've done some webinars that went really well that's actually brought me in some new customers who have been able to see what my friend Victoria and I do virtually. And so I think that the biggest thing is just trying to remain relevant in a time where people's budgets are being slashed, where people are being furloughed, but they're feeling like we still need to have this diversity inclusion talk. And what does it look like bringing it from a virtual space? So that's, I mean, really being my biggest thing is just being relevant, and being able to switch up what relevant means at that time. Because so many times we always think of relevant being a certain thing, but you have to be able to switch it up to say, okay, relevant in pre-COVID meant something, The beginning of COVID, it meant something. Now with all the things that are happening with the protesting, George Floyd, all of that, this is a way to remain relevant. So every time it's just kind of flexing with what remain relevant means.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And so I'm actually going to add a question that came in through the chat that is speaking to kind of the things that you all have talked about with this marketing. And that is, how do you address or deal with or get over the self-promotion, sales, marketing aspect of it when you're launching your own business? How have you managed to kind of get over any fears that you had or dislike for that? So I'm going to start with Meredith for that question.
So I kind of look at it from the job search standpoint. So I believe that I'm providing value. Much like if you were going into an interview, you are there because you are providing value. So it's not about the fact that I'm like, look at me, like I'm awesome, give me some attention here. It is actually like, I am going to share something with you that you will find value in. It's a mutually beneficial exchange that we're having. And like, yes, it definitely, it's not like I woke up and was like, I'm confident I'm going to do this, but I recognize now that I do provide value. So once I started to own that, it became less overwhelming for me to show up. The other thing is I also hired a coach. Like, I'm much like Megan, I think there's something to be said there. The coach I work with is obsessed with Instagram. That happens to be her thing. So she has also pushed me outside of my comfort zone to grow and develop and put myself on camera and to do this and that stuff that I'm like, oh, no, thank you. But I've actually had incredibly positive feedback. And the other thing about it is, when you recognize that like the people who are knocking what you're doing are not actually knocking you, it's much more of a perhaps something within them that they're working through, then it really doesn't matter as much, and it can kind of roll off like a duck, as opposed to it being something where it's so personal to put yourself out there.
Thank you so much for that. Megan, anything to add about getting over that self-promotional aspect?
All of the things that Meredith said, and it's a regular, I don't know that I'm over it, but I'm kind of in that, I'm on top of it, and I'm recognizing what are my triggers around that, like, oh, was that keeping me from? And so then going back to some of those things that I'm working with my coach, and going back to that idea of value. So it's not a kind of one and done, like, oh, great, you can check that off the list, but it's a continual process. So that would be the piece that I would add.
Great, thank you. Jen.
I think with this one, like when I do resumes and cover letters, if someone, most of the time somebody just tags me, I'm like, hey, if you're interested, holler at me. If not, there's some also amazing people. I think when it comes to doing diversity inclusion stuff, I think it's when I don't look at it as self-promotion. I think it's just doing a part of your job. As a college coach, you get used to hearing no so many times you think you're dealing with a toddler. No, no, no. Okay, next. And so I think like y'all with kids, you're so used to getting told no, you should be pros at this, you know? And so for me, it literally is like, you have to get okay with hearing no. Like that's the very first thing. And take it and say, okay, I'm gonna keep moving on. And with self-promotion, think about how are you promoting yourself? What are you promoting? Are you saying, this is what I'm bringing to the table, period? Or are you using like a lot of like emotion and, you know, I feel like this is great. Like, what are you saying? Are you saying these are the things I can work with you and that's it? Or are you trying to kind of use some other passive language, if that makes sense? And that should be the change, is that just think of it. If you were promoting the school that you worked for, you wouldn't even be thinking about this. You'd be like, these are the things I have to use. So kind of have that same mindset of, this is not just me, but this is a business I'm promoting. And think of it, I'm promoting a business, not just myself.
That's great, thank you. And Lenore, coaching, anything to add to that? We've got some great advice.
Yeah, so my hashtag that I used back when I was advising for business, hashtag let's get hired. So when I would send stuff to my students, you know, whether it was I did or, you know, some way for them to develop some skills, it was always hashtag let's get hired. So like, that's the focus. And so I think when we are working, our focus is always on the client. You know, we want to help them. And so just like Jim said, not everyone will use us, and that's totally fine. But like everyone else said, we have skills to help people get to whatever desired goal that they want. And the people who really need it will utilize it. One thing for like self-promotion, so I'm mostly the person who does the marketing stuff for us, and it has been hard to just like do a cold promotion out there, because I'm like, this is kind of random, like whatever. But what I have like better is I'll look on posts of people who are asking for some resume or job search help or advice and answer their question, but then also plug in, you know, if you want more help, here's where we can connect. So it's not just like a blanket, like just use me, but hey, you have a question, I have an answer, and let's see if we can build a relationship.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to share too, I have really been starting to plug into the LinkedIn community a lot. It's a community that I really enjoy, that space. And I attended a session, and one of the tips from the presenter was you only need to be 10% further along in your journey than anyone else. Because if you're 10% further along in your journey, then you have something to share that others, you know, haven't heard yet. So it's not like you have to be the expert before you put content out there. You know, just you share what you've learned in whatever you've done in the first, you know, 10% that you've gotten done to put out there. And that, I think, relieves some of the stress. And like, I don't know if I'm an expert in this space. Who am I to share it? It's just like, I'm just sharing what I've learned in my first part of my journey. Okay. So that's a great segue to talk about, like, how did you get started on this journey? So a lot of you are working other full-time jobs or doing other full-time initiatives at the same time, but can you talk me through, like, how did you start this? What were you doing before you like officially made the transition to kind of creating this business? And how and when did you decide that it was time for you to put more energy into this business? And I know that's a lot of questions all at once. Don't feel like you have to answer all of them, but if just any of that speaks to you and you'd want to answer to that. We'll start with Megan first for this question.
Thanks. So I left higher ed a little over 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago last week. And kind of my last bit of time leading up to that, I was just in that do I stay or do I go scenario, and had finally decided that it was time for me to do something different. I'd actually been in a leadership cohort program at my university and kind of was really talking about it. And I'm a big believer in that the universe sends you signals, right? If you, again, I live in Colorado, so I can say things like that. But you know, send you signals if you're willing to hear it. And at several points in time when I was like quasi job searching, again in higher ed, because that's how you make that transition, because you know there's no way to go outside of that. There is, by the way, that was just my own, you know, self-talk. People had said to me, have you ever thought about coaching? And some of the folks that were involved with our cohort program had been coaches or, you know, in some way, shape or form in organizations or on their own. And I was like, okay, fine, I will look into it. And was on the phone with a good friend who said, hey, I've looked into this program. I think I'm going to do this. And I was like, well, great. I don't like research, but I trust you. So, you know, kind of looked into that and figured out that there was really a lot of what I loved about my job in helping students, either undergraduate or graduate students, navigate what they're going to do next, what was their motivation behind what they were doing now and what brought them there, how to reframe what their experience is to a positive or a different way that's going to get us out of this rut and keep moving forward. That was a lot of what I saw coaching could be and how I wanted to do it. And so I chose to go into a program. It was about a 10 month program. But that was as far as I got, to be perfectly honest. It was, I needed a break and had a point kind of in time when I could take that break. And so I left without having a job and knowing that I was going to start this particular program, and it has evolved from there. And I really was like, I'm going to stay away from higher ed. You know, a lot of people leave higher ed and they're angry and they're carrying this baggage with them around industry and some of those things. And I was one of those folks. I'm no longer one of those folks, and have really worked through some of that. And so was able to kind of full circle bring that around to say, I really want to be able to help people, because we go into this field because we want to help people, and it really speaks to the best of who we are. Let's continue to do that, whether it's in higher ed or outside of that. So that was kind of that full circle piece for me as I left. So that answers.
That's great. Yeah, Megan. And as you were talking, I realized that there might not be a seamless transition between this question and our next question. So I'm going to go ahead and add that out there too. And you all can decide what you want to speak to even further. But the next question was just like talking about creating your own company and the steps that you took and just like figuring out what you needed to learn. And Megan, when you were talking about like going into this program, I heard that a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and let Jen speak to this now. But Megan, if you want to add any more to that at the end, we certainly can come back to you for this question as well.
Yeah, like I will always say I'm kind of the oddball of the bunch with this. So essentially I was coaching college and really started to see that intersection of diversity and inclusion not being talked about the way I felt it should be talked about, and naming stuff that just wasn't being openly talked about. So I just quit my job. I mean, I had zero plan. I had zero clue of what I was going to do. My mom was like, what? And I was like, what? We're going to see what's going to happen with this. We both had no clue, trust me. It was that conversation. And then I was able to work at Duke. And when I was working at Duke in academics, I started to figure out what my voice was, what I wanted to do, what platform I wanted to use. And so I was starting to, I think the first thing is that like the steps is you have to be willing to spend your own money. I think so many times people think that like money is just going to come in, like you have to be willing to spend your own money. So I was flying to places to speak. I bought like a tripod to record myself. So I had content. So I was like trying the little things I can do to kind of keep myself relevant. And then from that point, when I was at Duke, I really wanted to do my PhD full time, and I felt like I was going to be able to speak more. So I just quit Duke and then went and did my PhD. But also, like I did research on ways to have income while I was trying to figure this out and what that looked like. And so I think one of the biggest things I give people advice is you have to find your niche. You can't be the kitchen sink. You can't say, I'm going to life coach every single thing humanly possible, because then you're going to not have anybody, because you're not going to be an expert. So really, you're going to have to find your niche. And I knew that my niche was speaking on diversity and inclusion within athletics. Now, I do that in other fields, but I'm saying this is what my niche is right now. This is what you'll see me talking about a lot. And so many people don't want to narrow it down because they're worried that they won't get business, but you will get business because people respect that this is the area you talk about. And so also, I think when I was like starting my company, I have a friend who's an amazing business coach that has allowed me to lean on her a ton and helped me. And so that is a tremendous asset. But you have to be able to talk about your business in 20 seconds to somebody. You have to be able to have it very small and say, like I say, I have JenFryTalks. I focus on educating and empowering those within athletics, period. End of story. If you want to know more, then we can have the chat. But that's really where I begin and end at, so that people know everything I'm about. And so I think, like I said, just having the niche, figuring out like your mission statement that you can talk about it, and then the rest along the way, you're going to fall in potholes. You'll figure it out. You'll be like, why didn't I know this beforehand? Who can I call about this? And also don't be afraid to crowdsource. I crowdsource everything. Like, hey, I need to do this. Anyone have an idea? Because people are going to know. And it's a lot easier to crowdsource stuff than spend hours trying to read reviews and find stuff, and you end up not finding anything.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. Quintrel and Lorayah?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of steps of how we got started, I'll kind of answer from like career side and also like framing up the business. I think for me personally, I just saw such a need for just experienced professionals, very fundamental things that we work with students in terms of how, like networking is the heart of any sort of job search. And we're kind of quick as professionals to go and, invest in our education, get the certification, when probably you should spend more time networking in order to figure out what next steps are. So when I look at my own career journey, like I started out as a strength and conditioning coach at an undergrad. And what I enjoyed about that was not teaching somebody how to do an exercise. It was really the mentorship, the chance to create relationships. And from there, like I just said, okay, how can I just do this often, like more often? So long story short, I was able to transition to higher ed as an advisor, then career advisor, and then my current role. But in all that, I didn't realize that I was managing my career. I was building relationships in order to get to where I wanted. I did go back to school early on, but I think I spent more time building relationships than it was like, you know, investing $100,000 in education. So that I think we really want to bring that to just your average Joe, to all of us. It's for us to manage our careers, to grow. So it's the most strategic way that you can do that. You know, my wife and I'm talking about getting a PhD, but I can't just up and do that. It has to be a very strategic decision in terms of like how we're going to manage our kids. And so if you think about that for all working professionals, how can I make a very strategic decision to grow, to develop? Something simple as maybe I just need to learn how to communicate better in regards to pitching my personal brand for me to grow professionally, rather than, you know, spending, you know, $50K on a graduate degree. So in terms of how we got started with our own business, I think is for us, like taking folks that have been successful doing it. I have so many mentors that I've never met before, by looking at their business model, by hopping on LinkedIn, shooting messages, and just learning for what, you know, folks that are successful doing this. So I think that has been very helpful for us to frame this up. And by no means do we have it all figured out. I guess our brand is career development, but in terms of our niche and our lane, we're still trying to figure out what population, if you will, is our best sort of suited lane to be in.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. And then we'll go to Meredith.
So I actually left higher ed because my salary didn't cover the cost of childcare for my 2 kids. So that was my exit. I went back after I had my son and said, I love this job, but here's the bottom line. I said, I know you can't do this, but I feel like I need to come in and tell you what's what. So like, here's the deal. They said, thanks, we love you. Yes, we'll take you up on hiring and training the next person, but like, you're right, we can't do this. So that was my exit. In doing so, I had been doing events. I had been working in kind of a side hustle of doing social events with another company, and thought, well, maybe I'll lean into that. I networked my way into meeting a woman who owned her own company, who I didn't know, but she was tired of owning her own company and wanted to get into the workforce. So I said, well, let's trade. I will coach you on getting a job somewhere, and you will coach me on starting my own events business. And in the process of doing all this, we got her an amazing job at Google. And I was like, you know, maybe this is something. She said, you need to do this and not events. And I said, oh, you're silly. But much like Megan said, you know, universe is shoving signs in your face. I didn't listen. COVID hit, and then all events were canceled. And I said, okay, it's time to listen. So I leaned full tilt in here. One of the things that I do want to mention is I know there's this concept of like mentorship and networking, and I'm all about it. But I was in a forum the other day, and I saw someone was saying, you know, I don't think you should have to pay for mentorship. And it was a really interesting conversation about like whether you hire a coach to do something or you lean on your network and your mentors. And I think the one thing I want to say here is, especially in business, those are 2 very different relationships. And I think they are both incredibly valuable. So you've got the mentor who is like this other woman that was kind of coaching me through all this stuff, and we were working in trade. But then I also have hired a business coach, because that's somebody outside of my circle who's going to hold up a mirror, ask me the hard questions. They don't know me. And their expertise is really what I'm paying for. And I think it's such an important piece. Like, you know, we're all valuable and we have things to contribute. But I think sometimes we, especially in this bootstrapping space of like, we got to figure it out and like get it all done ourselves, we're hesitant to invest in ourselves in that way. But that's actually the one place that I decided I would invest in my business. Everything else I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to do whatever. But there are other people who have done this before me. And so I'm going to lean on them really specifically to help me grow. I saw the note about the certifications. I'll say I don't have a certification in coaching. I have my professional human resources certification, so PHR, and I have my MBA, and that's what I've leaned on. I am investigating getting a cert specific to career coaching. My understanding is that it is questionable which is the best, if there's the best. The certification entities have opinions. If y'all have thoughts on that, I wanted to kick it kind of to the group, but I would just wanted to share that like that's where my expertise lies, is in the hiring side of career coaching. And I've been on the recruiting side of it for long enough to know this is what can help you get there. And the coaching side from an HR business standpoint to understand like how do you help employees get to their next steps. And that's kind of what I'm using as my knowledge base.
Great. So I want to do rapid fire thoughts on certifications. So let's see, let's go with Jen first. Certifications needed, not needed? If so, which ones?
In D&I don't think there's any certifications. It's more about the education process.
And then Quintrel and Lorayah.
Nope, we don't have any certifications. I'm looking up ICF certifications for maybe expanding later for life coaching, but as of right now, nope, no certifications.
Thank you. Meredith, we heard your response. Megan, how about you?
I do have one. I don't think it's necessary. It was necessary for me. For coming from education, I was like, I need to know that I know what I'm doing, but I don't think, again, I think it's a burgeoning field from, you know, it's been accredited for about 20 years. And so there's been accreditations for about 20 years. So there is an organization, ICF, International Coaching Federation, that recognizes certain programs and to get, you know, certain levels. Again, I don't think that it's necessary. Again, just if you need it for your confidence level or for, you know, for that next step, then I think that makes sense, but I don't think it's necessary.
Great. Thank you all so much for that. And, you know, I think everyone has been talking about the value of having a coach to coach them. And I think there's so much value in that. I mean, if you think about like who in our world has coaches, it's always the folks that are performing at their highest level. And that's because they're getting that feedback. And so if you want to be in this space, you know, for you to believe there's value in what you're going to do, you probably think that there's value in someone helping you, you know, coach you into that space. That makes a lot of sense for me. Okay, so I'm curious now, what you wish you would have known when you first got started. And I know y'all are on different, you know, timelines as to when that getting started was, but let's start with Quintrel and Lorayah, because I think you're pretty new in this space. So what have you already learned that you want to pass along?
I'll be honest with you, my whole, I guess, mind frame, I always go with the flow. So I feel like I'm pretty adaptable, but I think it's always like just, it's, how do you sort of manage like all of your time? Like I can get in the flow of doing all things business for, you know, 24 hours of my day or 12 hours of my day, but I can't. I'm married, I got kids, I got a job outside of this. So I think it's just being realistic with how I manage my time and long-term goals. So that would probably be the big thing for me.
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Meredith?
For me, it's that there's value in messy action. So at some point, you just have to take the step and do it, even if it's not perfect and pristine and whatever. Like if it's the Instagram story that you're all clunky on, or the first Canva thing and there's a typo in it, or like whatever it is that you gave it a go, that you can waste weeks, if not months, trying to perfect something before you put it out there. And it might not actually be good. And that's the thing, is like you may have this idea and it may suck and no one's interested in it and you wasted all this time trying to create it. So I think at a certain point, just doing those little messy steps, it would have been great if I had done that a little bit earlier.
Awesome. Megan?
I think in addition to all of that, I think that the thing that I have really learned is the consistency part of it. When I was first starting, it was, okay, I'm going to put my blast out there and I'm going to reach out to the people I know. And within a week or two, I had the results that I had and was like, well, maybe this isn't the right time, right? And so then I took a step back, and then so I was always like, for the first couple of years, like I was always like coming back to it, like, okay, I'm ready to do this again, as opposed to just continuously with those messy action pieces, with adapting. And like, yes, maybe I wanted to spend 10 hours, you know, doing something, but I only had 2. How can I do that? And so, so that would be the consistent piece. And then again, speaking to that coaching piece, and spending your own money, which Jen referred to earlier, like when I really decided I was going to do that, it made a huge difference in how I approached my business and how my business fits into my life and supports that. So I spend a lot less time, not zero time, but a lot less time kind of beating myself up around I could have, I should have, some of those types of things. So I have a better grasp on that now, which that's what I always tell people if they're starting anything, right? Like hire somebody who's going to help you, so you know that you're doing what you need to be doing, help you in a way that feels authentic to you, so you can be consistent, continue to do that action, and make sure it fits your life.
Great, thank you so much for that. Jen, anything to add about what you wish you would have known?
Yeah, it's kind of right now, first three things of the first thing would be know your worth and stick to it. Because so many times you're like, well, this person said they don't have the money, so maybe I'll just do this. Like, no, just say, okay, thank you. You know, whenever you get the funds, we can revisit this. Because you have to understand, everyone will have you work for free if you allow them to. And so you have to find that middle ground of saying, I'm going to do these things for free because you're going to give me testimonials. You're going to recommend me to 5 people. Like, this is our game plan if I do this. Like, there's a difference in knowing that you have to grow your references and your recommendation and your reputation. And so you're going to do these things for these people who are going to help you out, versus people saying that they don't have the money and you just say, okay, I'll just do it for free. And you have to know your worth. I mean, there's this one conference that wanted me to come do this speaking engagements for free. And I was like, you want me to come speak for free and travel for free? And I was like, and I talked to a lot of my people. And then I was like, okay, if I do this for free, these things can maybe happen. And once I said yes, they're like, okay, well, we actually have these other 3 paid gigs that we want to do. And so kind of like really critically think about it, what you're doing for free. I think the next thing I believe Megan mentioned, like, pay people to do things. And I know you're like, well, I don't have the money. Then say, okay, what can I get for $75? What can I get? Because the less time you have doing something that you're not really good at, the more time you can do spending time doing something you're good at. So like, I had Jane, I'm like, I pay for you to develop all my graphics for social media. I'm shitty at that. Like, I don't have a good graphic eye. I just go super simple. Like, it's just bad. Like, if you look at my old social media, you're like, ooh, you did that? Like, ugh. And so I literally was like, I'm gonna spend the money. You're gonna change all of my all of the sheets I send out, all my graphics. Like, I'm gonna spend the money on that, because you know what? These really branded graphics and letterhead look amazing, and they're gonna make me more money. These really good social media graphics, people are seeing, they're going to share, it's going to make me more. So like, you have to be willing to put up that money and say, I'm not that good at this, and it's going to take a lot of time. Like, for me to develop one graphic takes so much time, because I'm so indecisive and I'm scrolling through everything, trying all these, like every single font, I try out every font, every color. Like, I just am all over the place with it. And so that's why I literally was like, I'm just going to have someone do all these and I can send them out. And then the third thing, kind of like what Meredith said, is that understand the thing that you're so scared of happening will happen, and you'll get through it. You know, I was so afraid when I was doing my TED Talk that I would forget what I was saying. And I've spoken in front of crowds, but there's nothing like being on that red dot with all these people and the camera on you. And I was so afraid of that, and it happened. And when I sat there and I was like looking at my notes, and I literally wanted to turn my head up and be like, my mind went blank. But I sat in it, knowing that it took me, it was like maybe a 10-second pause, but for me, it was like 3 hours. And I found where I was and kept talking. And I was so scared of that happening, it happened. And I have still not to this day watched my TED Talk. I still have not. But my friends are like, we haven't even seen it. What are you talking about? So to know that this thing that happened that I was so afraid of, I got through it, is like knowing that the typo will happen, and you'll be presenting and you'll see the typo and you'll get through it. Or the slides will be out of order and you'll pause and you'll get through it. So like, when you're going on this journey, the thing that you're so scared about will happen, and you will get through it. And you'll be like, damn, I was so scared of this and I got through it. And so just kind of keep those things in mind.
Great advice from everyone. Thank you so much for all of those tips to help encourage people. I want to talk about what your favorite part of doing this work that you do is, and also what your least favorite part of this is, so people can know what they're getting themselves into. I think, Meredith, you're up first on this question.
My favorite part is actually the coaching. So the one-on-one client meetings, that like aha thing when people come in and they're like, I think I want to be a project manager. And you're like, cool, let's talk about it. Like, let's dive in, you know, let's do a little work there. That's so fun. The aha moment, that like, it feels so incredibly gratifying for me, but also to like know and see what those next pieces are that are coming for those people is just incredible. My least favorite part, I would say, is probably like the salesy piece of it. But I've also kind of hit a point where I enjoy it. Like I'm learning to turn it into a game for me, but that's the part I'm least comfortable with. And the part that I was least excited about when starting the business was figuring out how to do the sales stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Meredith. Megan?
I would agree. My least favorite is the marketing piece, because it feels like it's really outside of my comfort zone. It's that graphic design that, you know, some of those pieces, I've kind of hit a stride with it, but it's still probably my least favorite. And my favorite is either coaching individually and having those moments. So people really, when they come to me, they're like, I don't know what to do next. And so really digging in and like, what do you think you want to do? What are your strengths? What are your values, and kind of finding some of those pieces and helping them reframe and find the language for that. That's really exciting to be able to do that. And then also doing it in kind of webinar or kind of larger groups like this. You know, everybody's groups look like this right now. And so, you know, being able to kind of share that. I loved that analogy that you used earlier, right around the 10%. I always think about like third graders to kindergartners, like it's not that much of a difference, but like, you know, a little bit more than other folks do in a specific area. And so being able to share that and making it easier for other people to make that pivot, or that just have a different way of thinking about it that kind of breaks their like I can't or I shouldn't mold. So whatever way I can do that is my favorite part.
Great, thank you so much. Jen, what's your favorite and least favorite?
So I'll do kind of the resume business and then JenFryTalk. So I'd say of the resume business, my favorite is when I redo the resume and somebody gets it back and they're like, wow, I didn't realize that this was me. Like I know I wrote all this stuff down, but like this is on me. Like all of this, I'm like, it's their words, right? So like that just reaffirming that how badass they are, because maybe they've lost their confidence. And so that is probably one of my favorite parts. My least favorite part is, to be very transparent, is like, if you're paying me to do this, keep my shit the same way. Like, don't pay me to do this and then you're going to rechange it all. Kind of like what Erykah Badu says, like, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. Like, that's how I feel. Like, people will pay me and then I'll send it to them and they'll be like, well, I want to change this, I want to do that. And I'm like, well, then why are you paying me to do this? Because you're going to then tell people, well, Jen did my resume and it didn't get any hits, and Jen did this. And no, Jen did A, you changed it to Z. Like, let's make sure that you put an asterisk by it. So that's like my least favorite, is that like people want to pay you to do this work that you're expert in, but then when it's outside their comfort zone, want to put it back into their comfort zone that wasn't making them successful in the first place. And I'd say my favorite part about JenFryTalks is like getting these emails from someone that's like, hey, you know what, I am a 66-year-old white man, and you know, the story about you can't, you know, teach a new dog, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks isn't true. Like, I've learned so much in your session, and I can't wait to start educating myself so I can be a better human and you know, a better person. So I think like that part's always exciting, and people who are like, wow, I'm thinking of this stuff in different levels now, and pushing my team or pushing people. I'd say the part I dislike the most, or dislike, yeah, it's just, I mean, you have to always be on edge and be prepared for the worst case scenario, especially in this time frame. And worst case scenario could be violence. Worst case, like, so I have to be always on edge and prepared. And I think when people are asking you to facilitate these conversations for free, they don't think about the worst case scenario. They're like, you're just going to talk about race, and what's the problem? Not like, yeah, and what if someone yells up and starts yelling the N-word, or what if a Zoom bomb happens, or what if someone is violent? Like, I have to worry about navigating all those situations, are things that people who want you to do this don't think about.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing those two perspectives, Jen. And then Quintrel and Lorayah?
Yes. So I think I'm a creative, so I like creating graphics. I love writing material. I like putting all of our stuff together, and I can get in the flow and lose hours whenever it comes to this type of stuff. I think for me, the nitty gritty, granular in terms of like how we market our materials when we send it out. Some of the stuff that's just like in the weeds, I would prefer not to, but that's probably what I like the least.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I like the most is the like after. So like when we have the reviews and the clients say that they've, you know, really were impacted, or just recently, like somebody was asking for resume or job search help, and somebody like tagged me and was like, hey, don't you do that? And so it's like, I didn't even have to like do anything. Like people are starting to know like our company and, you know, what we do. So, and that is good enough that somebody like recommended it. So yeah, I definitely love that. What I don't like, I don't like that I don't have enough time. Like, you know, because it takes so much time to do all the social media things, and maybe I don't like social media, but you have to like social media for this. But it's like sometimes where I want to have social media breaks, but then I say, oh, well, I can't really because I have to make sure I'm engaging. So just navigating that, like just for my own self-care, I think that's one thing for me.
Great. Thank you so much for those perspectives. Okay, I want to change our shift a little bit now and talk about folks who are job searching, because we have the benefit of having our experts on this call. So what tips do you have for folks who are searching right now based on your expertise? Also kind of folded into that, if folks are wanting to hire a coach, what tips do you have for them to be able to identify who is a good fit for them? And then things like networking during COVID times, like all of these tips that you might be able to give job seekers out there. And I think, Megan, I think we're back to you starting us off. Oh no, Jen, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Who feel called to it?
Okay, so some tips during this time. I would say the first thing is don't be afraid to apply to multiple jobs in the same office. That's how I got both my jobs at Duke. I applied to 2 jobs in the office, and they interviewed me for one and said, we actually like you for this other job that you applied for. We're going to interview you. And I got that other job. And the same thing at the job I got at Duke. I interviewed for this one job, and they're like, okay, they want you actually to apply for this other job. So don't be afraid to apply to multiple jobs. Also, you've got to tailor your resume to your job description. Like, I know it's tiring. I know that you're like, it feels like a full-time job. That's cool. It will feel like 2 full-time jobs if you just send out some generic resume that doesn't fit the job description. So you have to get used to seeing the job description and seeing the language it asks for. It's not asking for what you currently do. It's asking for what you do that the job description is asking for. And once you get used to making that switch, then I think you'll be a lot more successful. And then last, whenever you ask anyone to look at your resume, ask them to always look at the job description with it. Because the example I use is, say if I had this nice little cute summer dress, and I went up to you and was like, hey, what do you think of my dress? And you'd be like, that's a really cute dress. And then I didn't tell you it was for a black tie affair. You'd be like, no, that's not the right dress. And that's what happens when you just ask to show someone your resume. You haven't shown them the job it's for. Because they say, hey, this is my resume. This is the job I'm applying for. Do they fit? Do you see that same language? That way you can get a clear idea of how good or bad your resume is.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. Quintrel and Lorayah.
Yeah, I think Jen hit it on the head. If I were to add anything, I think it would be how you spend your time in the job search strategy. So you most certainly have to apply. You have to spend time applying for roles. You have to update your resume. But most of the jobs that are out there that are acquired are through networking. And so I think job seekers spend little time networking compared to updating their application material. So I would just say flip the time that you have for networking, making strategic connections as it relates to the resume, the job search application, some of the administrative stuff that comes along with the job search. What that means is, you know, if there's something that comes up that say, hey, like I'm really interested in this role, immediately go to LinkedIn and reach out, look for a recruiter for that organization, connect with them, send them a quick message. Hey, I saw your role. I'm really interested in it. This is what value I bring to the organization. Something quick like that to make a connection, because then the likelihood of you actually getting a lead to an interview increases greatly versus you just posting your job on their online search board. So I would just say network and then spend more time networking.
Yeah, and I just want to add just what he said, but like informational interviews are so important because fit is important. You know, we're not just trying to find any job, we're trying to find a good fit for you. So that informational interview allows you to kind of see a little bit into the culture that you may not be able to see on an interview. And it could just be another good way to network. So now you have a connection. But yes, think about the fit. It's just not all about making the money. It's not all about the better title. Fit for you is really important as well.
Thank you both so much. Meredith?
So I think to kind of boil it down high level, there's like 3 steps in your job search process. So I think it's about knowing what you want, it's about preparing your tools, and then you need to tap your network. And when you hit that network piece, it's not about who you know, it's about who they know. So somebody has a cousin who works at that job that you want. So you have to figure out who that person is and get yourself into that kind of space there. The other piece I know you mentioned was about, like, if you're going to work with a coach, how do you find that coach for you? I think you need to find somebody who, one, you need to make sure you actually want to work with a coach. Because like what Jen said, like if we're going to do the work as a coach and then you're going to be like, no, I'm cool, that just wastes your time. Like, it's a bummer for us, but like the bottom line is it's your results that are on the line, not so much our results. It's your job and what you're going for. So if you are absolutely not going to network, you should never work with me. Like, I'm just going to put that out there. If your job is to go out there and you're going to try to figure out a way to beat the resume bots and you're going to get yourself in that way, I'm not your girl. But if you want somebody who's going to push you to do these things and to grow you in that other direction, that's the kind of coach you should be looking for. And you should be looking for a coach who will tell you no, very directly, and saying, this is not going to get you the results that you're looking for. The other thing I will tell you is you can do so much of this on your own for free. You can look into resume tips. You can look into all of these things, but to me, it's also about the investment side of things. So what are you really good at? Like, are you really good at researching and doing these things? Or are you amazing in person? Are you super charismatic and you got it, but you don't know how to communicate that in a written word? So figure out how you can work to your own strengths rather than spending so much of your time trying to find the way to weasel your way in. The last little thing that I will say is a lot of people focus so much on their resumes and saying, my resume is going to get me my job. In my opinion, your resume might get you your interview, but your resume doesn't get you the job. There's still processes and steps to get you there. So you need to get in the door. And somebody with a skill set like what Jen's talking about, of like finding the language, looking at the language and figuring that out, that's an amazing and very specific skill set. And then you've got to do some more work on top of that. So understanding that the job search is such a tremendous experience and it's a process, and kind of buckling up for that as you go into it will help you be much more successful.
Thank you so much for that, Meredith. Megan, what would you add?
I would echo what everyone is saying. I think on the how to find the right coach is, most coaches in some way, shape, or form are going to do some type of discovery call, a consult call, something along those lines where you can get a feel for who they are. So come prepared with questions, and it's okay to say, I don't know what I don't know, but you can get a feel. Just because you get on a consult call with someone doesn't mean that you're like, well, I guess I have to sign up with them. You don't have to, because it is an investment. It is someone who's going to push you if that's what you're looking for. It is right, if it's a specific skill set. So really, and talk to multiple coaches, to see what's out there. And I think that the thing that I would add on the job search piece is kind of how it's evolved with what all of my fellow coaches have talked about is, when you get that interview, when you are talking with people, how are you sharing your story? I always tell people that you need to create and connect the dots for the people that you're talking to, whether it's a 30-minute interview, whether it's a day long or whatever that looks like. Figure out how you want to answer that question of, tell us a little bit about yourself, right? I don't want to hear back as a hiring manager. I don't need you to repeat back what's already on your resume. I don't need that because I've already got that, right? So how are you going to explain why you're there? If you have any gaps in employment, whether it's COVID related or not, how do you want to talk about that, and not from a place of a deficit, right? Of like, oh, I know, just tell them what you want them to hear, not what you think they want to know. Because to Lorayah's point around fit, if you're just telling people what they want to hear, that's awesome. But if it's not really a good fit for you, then now you have to live with that consequence for a while, and you have to go through the job search again. So really get clear on your story and practice that. Practice how you want to answer that question or multiple questions. And so you can do that again with a coach. as part of that, you can do that with someone. But if you're going to do that with not a coach, perfectly fine. Again, to Meredith's point, you can do a lot of this on your own. Find somebody who's going to give you some honest feedback and not like, nope, I think that was absolutely great. It may be great. What else can I do, right? So find people who are going to give you that feedback to really hone your story, so you can present it in a way so when you walk away from that interview, whatever that looks like, you know that you didn't leave anything kind of on the table for that in-person piece of it.
Great. Thank you all so much for that. That's so helpful. We had another question come in that I just want to see if anyone's willing to answer. Would you be willing to share what your rates look like in terms of individual, group, speaking engagements, resumes, all of that? Would anyone be willing to share? And I'll just let you all kind of decide how you want to respond to that.
I mean, I'll share. My resume is $100, cover letter is $65. I do interview prep at $35. Once I've done the first resume with you, resume and cover letters after that are $55 and $35. I will not just do a resume. I will do the resume and cover letter together, because I'm not going to do a fabulous resume and then your cover letter is going to be bad and then you're going to blame my resume. That shit ain't happening. No. So we're going to do both of them so that you have a great piece with both. Not be like, Jen did my cover letter, you know, and she's the reason I get the job, but like your resume was like 5 words and a picture of my cat. No.
Thanks, Jen. Anyone else care to share?
So, you know, we're newer, so we're still trying to figure it out. But one thing that we have implemented is that we have 3 different tiers. So if you are a student, then you have one fee. And so just, you know, looking at that. So if you do a resume or cover letter review, and not just us reviewing it, not us actually writing it from scratch or anything like that, it's $25. If you're early career, so you know, you just recently graduated from college, then it's $50. And then if you're experienced professional, then it's $100. And then we have coaching packages as well. And that's tier from $200 to $350. And then cover letter writing ranges from $75 to $200.
Great, thank you.
I have a handful of packages, just kind of the quick and dirty here. I have just a clarity session and a resume review. So 2 sessions is $197. The job search starter pack, which is a bit more involved, is $347. And then there's a monthly access package of somebody who's really doing the deep work to figure out like what they want to do and move it forward. It's where some of the executives tend to land in this space of really navigating it. And that's more high touch, more sessions, and more resume specific work. And that's $547 a month.
Thank you.
I tend to work with people on a 3-month weekly for 3 months, tends to be kind of where we're building habits and looking at that. So for those 12 sessions that are involved with that, my fee currently is $1,200. So it works out to about $100 per session, or exactly. And so that's really where I work with people on. I also do interview prep and some other pieces of that. That's typically done through referrals. If people are like, hey, I was just looking for this, and I'm happy to do it. Again, like what everybody's saying, want to get a more holistic, because you don't want to just look at one piece or just do, you know, something for one interview question or something along those lines. So, so that's what I do.
And Jeannie, if I can just pop back on real quick. So one thing I just want to throw out there is like, that's by far one of the most common questions, one of the most uncomfortable things to navigate as an entrepreneur. So if you're sitting here looking at all of us being like, that's what you got to do if you end up wanting to be in these seats of saying like, I'm a service provider. You need to know what your worth is. You need to be able to speak to your worth. And I'll be totally honest, it's still the most uncomfortable part for me and what that looks like. But I think if you are here not for like, teach me how to get a job, but you're here because you want to do this, know that that is something you've got to do on the regular. And sometimes it's a little bit clunky.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I just want to make sure everyone is aware, of course, all of these fantastic panelists are doing this for free. So thank you all, you know, for donating your time to helping other current expats or future expats figure out how they fit into this field or other fields. I put a few resources in there that I found at different times. LinkedIn Learning, I think most institutions, if you're still at an institution, has the ability to use LinkedIn Learning for free, and there's all kinds of resources through LinkedIn Learning. You can also sometimes get it through public libraries. So check out that. There's a bunch of free courses that you can actually get certifications for that you post on your LinkedIn profile as well. So we're just about 3 minutes before we wrapped up. So thank you all so much for being here. Panelists, you shared so much information, both for job seekers as well as folks who might want to go down this path. So thank you, and the recording will be posted. Also, again, that link is where you can find additional follow-up if you found your future coach or service provider on this call. Make sure you check out their websites and their resources. Megan, Meredith, Jen, Quintrel, Lorayah, thank you all so much for being here. You provided invaluable resources, and Fish, thank you for being here as well. Thank you all.